Russian attack through kamikaze drones onto grain storage warehouses only a few hundred meters from the Romanian border has raised a lot of eyebrows, because Romania is part of NATO and Russian missiles and kamikaze drones are not that accurate. President Zelensky coming out with a very clear statement regarding corruption and anyone involved in corrupt activities in the Ukrainian government or organizations related to the Ukrainian government. And this is important because he was elected on an anti-corruption ticket as one of the things. And one of the biggest areas of concern for both the EU and NATO, and therefore other international allies, is how much of what is being provided to Ukraine is actually disappearing into the historical corrupt practices and organizations that always cause people to put a big question mark over Ukraine's ability to properly govern itself. And President Zelensky coming down hard like this is a very clear statement, and something that will give the West an increasing amount of confidence that it is one of his top priorities to crack down on. That can only help him whenever it comes to getting not just money to help rebuild Ukraine and to sustain itself with the current war that's going on, but also when it comes to persuading governments in Western countries to continue to supply arms and money to Ukraine so that they can continue their fight. Ukraine is a multi-ethnic country. It has got an awful lot of people who identify as ethnic Russians, first and foremost, and Ukrainians second, even though now they're probably identifying more as Ukrainians first and Russians second. But it means, in the same way that we find in virtually every country where people have got different backgrounds and different identities and potentially different historical loyalties and family loyalties, that those differences in some occasions will lead to either misjudgments on behalf of individuals or areas which can be exploited by hostile intelligence services. And inside Ukraine, because of the very close family links that there have been and political links that there have been historically between the Ukrainians and the Russians, it is very easy for Russian intelligence services to get in and find individuals that they can manipulate either through blackmail, through pressurizing family elements where families are in Russia and elsewhere, or identify people who still have tacit behind closed doors loyalties to Russia rather than to Ukraine, especially with the massive changes that came in when President Zelensky took over as president of Ukraine. He wasn't a popular president when he first came in amongst many of the hardliners, especially because he came in on an anti-corruption ticket, and many of those that were involved in those sort of corrupt activities could see their business potential in the future falling away rapidly. The Russian attacks against Ukrainian port infrastructure and grain infrastructure have continued. And the one that has been most worrying is on the Danube port of Reni and the Russian attack through kamikaze drones onto grain storage warehouses only a few hundred meters from the Romanian border has raised a lot of eyebrows, because Romania is part of NATO and Russian missiles and kamikaze drones are not that accurate. And it's very close to the potential for a direct attack on NATO territory, or even an accidental attack onto NATO territory. But that is politically upping the ante, and whether Russia chose that as a target deliberately to try and put pressure on NATO and say, we can come right up to your border, or whether it was just chosen because that's where the grain silo was and they didn't realize that, we don't know. There have been indications, according to UK Defence Intelligence, that the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been put on an increased readiness after Russia pulled out of this Black Sea grain initiative that's caused and stimulated all of the attacks against the Ukrainian ports. And UK Defence Intelligence have reported that the corvette Sergei Shoigu has deployed into the southern Black Sea to try and patrol the shipping lane between the Bosporus and Odessa, Now, if it's going to try and stop international grain ships going in, again, this is upping the ante enormously. Now, it's also upping the threat to the Russians because the Ukrainians have got some very sophisticated and very capable Western anti-ship missiles. It's how they're going to deploy those anti-ship missiles in a way that they could potentially attack corvette Sergei Kotov, and any fleet that goes to join it is a different question. The other thing that's interesting in the strategic side of things is that we have suddenly seen the Russian Defence Minister Shoigu pop up in a place where we can verify where he is and we can verify the time that's there, because he's gone to North Korea ostensibly to attend Pyongyang's 70th anniversary celebrations, but also it's pretty certain to build up an increasing relationship between Russia and North Korea, and potentially see North Korea as a supplier of military material and weapons, including shells and rockets and other bits and pieces. This is something that the Wagner Group had done beforehand through Prigozhin, but this is the first time there's clear evidence of the Russian state getting involved. What does that tell us? That tells us that actually Russia, from a military materiel and ammunition perspective, is probably in a more desperate position than we thought. North Korea is interesting in that most of its military capability is based on old Soviet technology. So the calibers of ammunitions that it uses are exactly the same as the calibers that the Russians have got, both within its small arms ammunition, its rockets that it can fire from multi-launch rocket systems and elsewhere, and its artillery shells. And North Korea, because of its very militaristic approach and position, where it sees itself almost on the edge of war with South Korea, has got huge stocks of ammunition, more than such a small country would need. And therefore, I believe it's those stocks that the Russians are going and trying to get hold of. And what will North Korea want in response? They'll want foreign currency. They'll want natural resources, they'll want food for the people, and they'll want increasing amounts of technology for North Korea's nuclear program and delivery methods of its nuclear weapons, as well as for advanced engineering so that can up its production output to help support Russia.